Neil Marzolf and his wife are the owners of Rants and Raves Brewery and Restaurant, which is located or will be located in the old Culligan building located on North Jackson Street, just south of the Rosars parking lot and adjacent to the C Street right-of-way. And the property itself has no off-street parking. The parking is located on Jackson Street, and there is an adjacent public right-of-way that has not been vacated, C Street, which is not open for, it's open for traffic, but it's not a part of C Street. It's a retained right-of-way by the city. Throughout this situation, Mr. Marzolf and his wife purchased the property, and without, at that time, the knowledge that they would be required to have parking adjacent to the business to meet the zoning code. Came in, talked to city staff. That was made clear to Mr. Marzolf, and he started looking for alternatives. Dealt with adjoining property owners and could not find the best piece of property that could be used for parking. That property owner was not interested in leasing for a parking lot. He attempted to contact Latah Sanitation, which operates Moscow's recycling center, and of course they don't have the authority to lease city property, at least part of the recycling center. So he came to the city, and we identified the remnant of the southbound couplet on the north end of town, which is a remnant property that was left to the city or granted to the city by ITD by quitclaim deed. It is therefore city property. It is not public right-of-way. Back in 2002, there were several property exchanges between the city and ITD for remnant pieces of property ITD needed for perhaps location of signal boxes, so on and so forth. So this was one of those pieces of property. One of the other prominent pieces is the one just north of CJ's Tavern, or CJ's Club downtown. CJ's. Owned by Phil Roderick. So this is a situation. Mr. Roderick, as you know, leased that property for time from the city for parking. Mr. Marzolf has agreed, city has agreed to present to the city council. If you look at the exhibit, you can see generally the size of the property that would be proposed. The terms of the lease, Mr. Marzolf has seen. Essentially, it would be for $100 a month. Bill Belknap indicates that because it is across a right-of-way, there will not be a CUP required for utilization of that parking lot for the brewery and restaurant. There are also some improvements, even though it is a paved parking lot, that will have to be made by the Marzolfs, and that includes relocation of a street luminaire standard in the property, as well as striping of the entire area so there's no confusion and safe parking and passage of vehicles can be had there. Something that came up, I was just talking to Mr. Marzolf about the potential for an ADA accessible ramp, because one of the spaces, 9 spaces are required, which includes one ADA accessible space. Whether or not it would be necessary for Mr. Marzolf to install an ADA ramp, and in speaking to Les McDonald, he would work to find out if that is necessary and if it is something that would be part of the lease, or whether it's something that the city would participate in depending on where it is located. That can be worked out. But there will be language inserted in the lease that addresses the ADA accessibility as well. With that, community development has indicated that there must be at least a 5-year lease on the property in order that it meets the requirements of the zoning code. So with that, correct? You're looking at me like I'm saying something here. Anyway.
Is he doing okay, Bill?
For the moment. So with that, go ahead.
Not quite.
I would just clarify that there's no defined term that's required by the zoning code. It just has to be in force and effect as long as the use is active.
Okay.
Didn't mean to put words in your mouth.
Questions for Gary? Art?
Looking at the map, it looks like there's 15 spaces. Is that correct?
16.
Those spaces are not entirely on the leased premises.
Yeah.
So
but-
they overlap.
So 9 on, but then there'll be other striped spaces available for other
For others.
businesses
Yes.
around.
Okay, Wayne, did you have a?
Had along the same questions that Art had. So, from as far as I needs 9 spaces, there's the way it's marked off on our map shows 16 spaces. Is he responsible for striping all 16 spaces?
Yes.
So, I would assume then that where he's going to be leasing 9, that there'll be a sign that will be put up indicating private parking for his business.
Yes.
How are the other 7 spaces going to be regulated?
You'd have to ask Les. I'm assuming it would just be public parking.
That is correct. It would be open public parking, similar to what's out there today.
3 hour?
Right now, it's just kind of wide open, and people park wherever they choose.
So are we going to be looking at changing that to those 7 spaces to 3-hour parking, or
I don't envision that.
we'll talk about that later,
not
right?
bad.
I would see it
Downtown,
remaining
that's
open.
not really-
And I should just point out that the striping plan you see here is a preliminary version. There's several of them. This one was really included to show where the area.
That was doing it to show that there would be enough spaces available for what was requested. John, you had something you wanted?
Well, I'm fully in favor of this. The only thing that I would like to see added would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pints of your finest available once a month.
Oh, John.
Stephanie, distract that from the record, that, and I'll go to Walter.
Well, like John, I'm in favor of the proposal. I'm not going to go with his second part. But as Les just said, Exhibit A in our packet, Gary, is in the resolution as the plan. But according to Les just now, and in talking to him earlier today, they've got several different versions that they're still trying to either conclude within Les's shop or possibly work with the owner to conclude what the striping plan will actually be. So I'm wondering if the motion that gets made tonight, I presume to approve this, needs to leave some flexibility for an agreeable plan. And also, I would like for that motion to include the ADA accessible ramp, should that be deemed necessary, in addition to the streetlight relocation and the striping of the entire property.
Your Honor. On the
Rod?
Exhibit A, just the triangle is supposed to just show the property that's going to be leased, and not necessarily where the parking spaces are going to be in there. I think that was for demonstrative purposes to show that they could fit in there, but I think this is just the area that is going to be leased.
Okay, all right.
We can certainly change the exhibit so that it's clear that that's its purpose.
If I may, Gary, I'm correct that the striping plan will be dictated by the city, and that the one we're looking at is not necessarily the final one.
No question.
Okay.
Les has made it clear. They've had a couple of iterations. He'll get his staff on it, and they'll figure out something that works. If I may, too, I think I figured out where I probably backed Bill into a corner. I hope no one is coming away from this with the understanding that if this lease is for 5 years, if it goes away after 5 years, the use cannot continue. There has to be adequate parking for the use to continue in the building, as I've informed Mr. Marzal, if he's okay with that. So I think I found out where I misspoke about that. So
Dan?
I apologize for that.
As Walter was saying, can we put in the, I guess, Part 7, a C, saying that if the handicap spot and access, ADA compliant access is necessary, that needs to be, a part of his installation as well? Have it under 7 and
Sure.
have a C?
We'll just add that other condition that the improvements that
Because of that, that's where the improvements to the
Yep.
premises are, so.
Art?
Yeah, I was going to say, and I'd like to add and reinforce that I'd like to see sufficient parking spaces be striped in there to accommodate not only the brewery, but also other businesses that have traditionally used that area, to provide them with adequate parking as well, and not just devote everything to just those spaces, to make sure that other spaces on the periphery of the non-leased area can accommodate sufficient parking for those other existing businesses.
if I could respond to that.
Okay, Gary?
Part of the reason that the striping is going into the adjacent areas is to make sure that there is an adequate parking plan that people can ingress and egress the property without, to make sure that it's safe and hopefully accident-free. So that's the reason the striping, because it's a plan together. There is no intent to have Mr. Marzolf, other than providing the striping to facilitate his area, so he'll be striping the entire parking lot. It's not intended to have him improve properties for other businesses.
No, but I think it does have to be very clear that parking does exist for other businesses in that area, having used that space for some time now for parking for their businesses, and I don't want to see them excluded to the extent that this one lease area precludes their use of a traditional area.
Neil, come on up here and you can address the council.
Yeah, I'm Neil Marzoff. Do I gotta give my address?
Yep, guess your address.
3455 Highway 95 South here in Moscow. So I think you guys have all seen the building. You know, I'm not afraid to improve something. To answer your question more directly on the parking area, it helps my business and the future of my business to have that parking lot properly striped throughout. So even if it said, hey, just stripe these 9 spaces, I'm actually would say, hey, can I please stripe the rest of them? I want the parking lot to look as good as I've made the building, because that will help my business and help me be more successful in the endeavor. And so the fear of not making it accessible to the other businesses are in the location. I want to make it accessible to the other businesses in the location, because they'll come over and have beer and eat some of my Irish food. So, you know, I'm excited about making that whole corner look a lot more pleasant, because I believe the benefits to us will be even greater.
Another question. Mr. Marzoff, you own the entire building, and those are your tenants anyway, aren't they?
That is correct.
So it would, I mean, to me, it just behooves him to improve the lot for his tenants.
State Farm is actually a separate building, aren't they?
State Farm is a separate building, and we do not own the State Farm building.
So that's part of why I was saying, you know, we got to still
Yeah,
them going.
I did speak with them, and they have between 2 and 3 cars at any given time. Very seldom do they have. Matter of fact, I was told they have never had more than 3 cars. So.
Okay. Well, thank you, Neil.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, just
Yeah.
not to beat this horse any further than we've already beat it, but the parking, other than for the 9 spaces, that is not attributed to any particular other business, is it? It's to anyone that wants to park there,
Correct. Yeah.
as all parking
Yeah.
is downtown.
You could park there and walk 3 blocks away to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's exactly right,
So-
John.
Spending a lot of time and energy, unless he chooses to mark those spots in front of those particular businesses, is not something that he should be responsible for doing.
I'm sorry, John, would you say that last part again? I didn't follow.
He is responsible for marking out his 9 spaces that we are going to lease him, or that we are being asked to lease him. There are other spaces. There are other places to park adjacent to or within the same parking lot. Those other spaces can be used by anyone. For example, if you're not going into the insurance agency, you can still park there.
I get it.
Okay, and what I'm saying is, that being the case, should not be his responsibility to mark all of those as, that would be, if the city wants to, the city can,
Well, he's going to do it, John, because he wants that whole parking lot being improved so it looks like what his
Good
building
enough.
is. He just said that to us, so,
good enough.
okay.
Well, this came before Public Works and Finance last week. We discussed all these fine parts, and we were all very much in favor of it. And I want to thank staff for working as well as they did with between Les and Bill and Rod, Gary. We had Mr. Marzoff came forward with a parking problem for downtown business, and this was solved, and it was solved very expeditiously. Having gone by that lot numerous times, it's really not utilized as well as it should, and I think this is going to be a great improvement for that particular area. I certainly like the improvements to the buildings himself that he's done, and this will just add to it. And so with that, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the attached lease of the parking lot to Mr. Marzoff, doing business as Rants and Raves Brewery and the restaurant.
Second that motion.
Okay, we
If I-
made a motion.
If I may, I'm sorry. With the addition of the ADA.
With number 7, with the addition that ADA ramp and compliant necessary product will be added to it. That's part of the motion.
Okay, Wayne made a motion, Jim Bolin seconded to approve the attached lease of the parking lot to Neil Morozov, DBA Rants and Raves Brewery and Restaurant, and with the addition of C under 7 for an ADA accessible ramp. Correct?
Yep.
All right, we'll go with Walter.
Aye.
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 You have got your lease, sir.